from the Salvation Army National Headquarters, this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Foley. We come to you from National Headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia on this fine summer day. Hope things are well with you in your world. Here with me today is our War Cry Editorial Director, Mr. Jeff McDonald.
Greetings, Colonel Foley. Good to be with you. Thank you.
Also with us, as always, is our wonderful producer, Elizabeth. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello there.
So we want to start this episode. Well, this episode is dedicated to our July 2020 issue of the War Cry. This is issue number 4 that has been produced by our lickety-split, very talented, wonderfully skilled publications team at National Headquarters. It has been produced remotely by this team. And Mr. McDonald, I am just so proud of your direction and how the production of this magazine has turned out. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's really a joy to do this work and to be able to, play to people's strengths in our department and have us all collaborate and work together. I always find that, there's value in getting other people's ideas and sharing opinions and collaboration. And I think we continue that in this time of remote working. So I'm very appreciative to you and all of our staff.
A long time ago, I think early in my ministry, I remember hearing the metaphor used. This is kind of particular in the mid 80s was, your life is wet cement. And, I remember as a kid when my dad would make the patio or the sidewalk and he'd have everything, he'd mix the cement himself, have the mixer and, the wheelbarrow. And, he'd have me out there with the shovel kind of working the gravel in it. And the big thing about pouring and making those patios and those sidewalks in the backyard was not the pouring and getting it all looking good, but it was when you got to carve your initials in it. Did you ever do that, Jeff? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Yep.
I think there's still a patio in Browns Valley of Napa, California that has my little initials on it. And every issue of the War Cry is just like, it's like wet cement for us.
It is.
It just has that feel.
And when I say joy, I mean, we know that the Word of God stands forever. And in this time of shifting currents in our culture, we can stand on the Word of God and we get to proclaim that and, elucidate on it in our publication and show how it's helping people move into new directions and how the Army is actually embodying the gospel in what it does. So, as I said, it is a joy.
Well, it's a joy too, because we don't have a lot of voices speaking at us saying, you've got to do this, do this, do this, do this. I mean, we have our whole editorial processes that we go through, the checks, the double checks, triple checks, and looking for theological content, making sure it's right, kind of fairly adequately telling the story of the Salvation Army nationally. So the one of the wonderful things that I enjoy is the freedom that we have in our magazine to tell the good news, to tell the gospel story, and also to tell what servants of God through the ministry of the Salvation Army are doing across the country. And in the past 4 months, it has just blown me out of the water. Not only what we're doing in the country, but what the Salvation Army is doing, internationally during this horrific COVID crisis.
Yeah. And, when I think about our staff members and all the great work we're doing, well, that extends far beyond our walls to those people who write and illustrate and send photos and contribute and give us their stories. They're all part of this. And we just, really encourage people to look to us to share what they have to say and what they have to report.
these are very heavy days with a lot of different things, but I want to, and we could talk about all kinds of different issues. And, there's a myriad of rabbit holes to kind of go down in front of us, but I see a rabbit hole in front of us right now. And there's like a neon sign flashing over it. And it says fluff, fluff, fluff. So I want us to just kind of go light a little bit. We've got to laugh, and we got to, not take ourselves too seriously at times. But I was thinking a little bit about kind of fluff sort of things in this time. And you know how much I appreciate both you and Elizabeth. You guys are like some of the coolest people and some of my favorite people on the planet that I get to work with. But I'm just wondering if you could let our listeners know, what kind of fluff things have you been kind of dealing with to help you personally kind of like cope with the trying times that we're in? Like, has there been things that you've been binge watching, binge eating, binge sleeping? I don't know. Just what's out there that's been kind of fun and reviving to you?
I have been binge eating acai bowls.
That's the noodles with the vegetables.
No.
No.
This is like I was big on it out west. It's this some sort of like acai super food mixture, and then you put fruit and like coconut and granola on top of it, and it comes in a bowl.
Oh, okay.
But when you go buy them, they're like uber expensive. So I'm like, I could make that myself. So I bought this acai online in bulk, and it came with like that frozen ice that steams.
The dry ice?
Dry ice.
Yeah.
And that's what I have just been plowing down.
Oh.
Wow. And does it taste good?
Well, here's the thing. I made the decision to get the unsweetened acai because I eat enough sugar in my free time. I figured this should not be sugary. But it's so bitter. There's no sugar in it.
So you're adding sweetener to it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm adding probably more sugar.
That's awesome. What about you, Jeff?
Well, I've been trying to do some chores. I'm not that handy, so I'll go about trying to put a shelf up or, fix a piece of equipment or a landscaping tool. And it'll take me, I thought I'd do it in 15 minutes. Well, it takes me 5 hours after I look at YouTube and, made all the mistakes and screwed the bolts in the wrong way. So I'm learning in that also early on. My wife ordered supplies online, got delivery, the essentials, bottled water, toilet paper, and in there was a big box of Oreo cookies. And of course, my eyes, got the size of saucers. And needless to say, that box is no longer available.
Oh, Oreo cookies. That's burnt chocolate and sweet Crisco oil. That's what an Oreo cookie is.
Yeah. And also my children have been coming over. It's interesting, this time of isolation, people do like to get together. You just have fun getting together while social distancing. But my older children come over and they make sure they stay very far away from us because it makes me feel very prone to illness or something because they're treading lightly around me. I feel, oh my goodness, I'm not that fragile. Come on.
Yeah, I sometimes I have a hard time hearing my wife. Just the way she announces, and then my hearing is probably, So this social distancing thing is not good sometimes. For what? What did you say? Can you repeat?
Yeah.
So I'm going through that whole thing. Well, and one last thing I was saying, one of the things that my wife and I have been doing, we've been kind of interested in this over the years, but we've really gotten very intense with it during COVID. We have a lovely backyard, and we have a woods that's kind of right behind us. We have a lot of nature, a lot of wildlife, and we have a lot of different birds. So we've been learning the different varieties of birds, and then I bought a new feeder, and we're just like little kids getting all excited when we watch the birds, but it just reminds me again, of course, the scriptures. Jesus talked an awful lot about, pay attention to the sparrow. God cares for the sparrows. If he cares for the sparrows, he cares even more and more for you. So in these days of where the anxiety levels are kind of at an all-time high, the anger levels, the rage, the unrest, the rudeness, as well. Let's take a pause. I think, take a pause, enjoy this life that we have. There are things around us that are reminders of the presence of God, in that God is working still in the cycles, and God's still working in the stillness of our hearts. So we hope our listeners and the readers of the War Cry will get a sense that, those of us that are putting this magazine together are doing so with a lot of prayer and a lot of love and a lot of concern for people that are receiving this magazine on the other end. Well, let's talk about the July issue of the War Cry. Jeff, when we line out our themes, we do so almost 18 months in advance before we start enacting on it. And we had decided last summer, we were working on themes, and we decided to kind of go with this idea of citizenship. And so the readers will find that theme kind of flowing through this article or this issue. What are some of the positive aspects that you feel that come for us from us being citizens of the United States?
It's just such an honor to be able to celebrate Independence Day upcoming July 4th and to, represent that in our magazine. We focus on the idea of freedom, and we know from the gospel that if we are free in Christ, if Christ makes you free, we are free indeed. And I just value so much the freedom and the we enjoy in our country, but also in current events. I see very positive things emerging in that we are always striving to meet the goals laid out in our foundations of our country, whether it be equality under law, inalienable rights of treating everybody as a child of God. And I'm just very encouraged by what's happening, even though there are difficult times for us. I'm also very encouraged that we have the freedom to improve, to make our world better. And I think we're all part of that. And Commissioner Hodder talks about that in his interview as he becomes as the Hodders become our new national leaders. And also, I think Colonel, you wanted to speak about Lieutenant Felton's poem
Yeah, I
in
was just going to
regard to
say,
that.
well, in this issue on the cover, we have a picture of our new national leaders, Commissioners Ken and Jolene Hodder. We have two podcasts devoted to the Hodders in our fight for good, and you'll want to pay attention to the podcast list, and they did a great job sharing their hearts with us, and we're excited about the new start that they're going to bring with their leadership here. Uh, but I know the last couple of issues, I think one of my jobs as an editor in chief is to kind of look out on the horizon and just kind of be mindful of the waves at sea out there, so that we don't wake up and be accused of being tone deaf, or we're not paying attention to the things around us. The Salvation Army is, as a whole, apolitical, and we are an organization that doesn't tolerate racism. We're fighting for good. We're sounding the war cry against poverty, against homelessness, against corruption, against racism, and things of that nature. And in this country, we have Salvation Army officers working in all kinds of diverse settings and neighborhoods, often unheralded, often unappreciated, and often just going about day in and day out doing the job that God has called them to do, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and to love others without discrimination. Yes, there's a lot of faults and things that we need to improve in our organization, but I think 99% of us are committed to doing the best that we can to get in and try to make our neighborhoods better people, a better situation for the people there. And in doing so, we become better people in ourselves. Jeff, I think I frustrated the last two issues. I frustrated our staff a little bit because we got so close to pulling the trigger on sending everything to the to the publisher and getting it out, that I kind of said hold the presses. And I know I did that with this issue because we got a very powerful poem that was given to us by a brand new Lieutenant Karen Felton. And Karen comes to us from the inner city of Chicago, working a corps with her husband. And at the time Karen wrote this, she was a cadet. Her husband's already commissioned as a Salvation Army officer, and she'd been serving with her husband in this corps on the west side of Chicago. And she wrote a poem, and it was brought to my attention. And we looked at the poem. I gave the poem to you, and you got excited about it, and we got so excited we did a podcast. But we've devoted on page 33 that kind of leads off this issue of how much is one life worth, and then we have a 2-page spread of what the Salvation Army is being called to do in this time of the Black Lives Matters and movement, and seeking justice and ending racism and all of that sort of stuff. Jeff, did you want to talk a little bit about that poem and your impressions and some of the thoughts here?
Yeah, speaking with Lieutenant Felton, she's right in the throes of a really tough area in Chicago where there's gang infiltration and racial tension between different groups. And, she makes the point that she does not take sides. All she wants to do is bring in Jesus to the situation. And she was so moved by the events around her during that the uprising after the murder of George Floyd, that she penned that poem late at night, I think it was, just to emphasize the fact that we have to keep in mind that we all are brothers and sisters. We are one family in the human race, and that we are all, we all deserve respect and integrity. And I think that's something that, comes through in her poem. It's funny too, because in the interview with the Hodders, Commissioner Jolene Hodder says about serving overseas, people are so different and yet we're the same. One of the things I learned is that love and respect go a long way in ministry. You can make a lot of mistakes, but when people know I love and respect them and want what is best for them, then they come alongside me through thick and thin. So that's kind of I think that poem speaks to that as well. And I commend all those Salvation Army officers who are out there doing that work.
And these are not easy situations that many of our officers find themselves in. Many officers are in harm's way for people who are, either they're riding on the coattails of the peaceful demonstrators, or there's all kinds of different political and other sorts of things going on. So we're grateful to Lieutenant Felton.
Yeah, there's so much we could say about this issue. I don't want to go on and on, but again, I'm encouraged, and we can all join together in faith that our country stands on firm foundations, and it is we're blessed to be in this country. We have a citizenship quiz in this issue that people might be interested in checking out, and also there's a cadet testimony in this one about a man who was a police officer in Russia, and who actually came to know Christ through Salvation Army Salvationists who went there to his area in Russia to do mission work. And they introduced him to Christ. And the more he became aware of the Salvation Army, what it does, the more involved he became. And he ended up in Atlanta and becoming a Salvation Army officer. And it's an incredible story.
It's a great story. And we're grateful for the stories that we have received from the various training colleges. as the training colleges have just experienced their ordinations. We'll cover that a little bit coming up in the August issue, kind of is a little bit historic with all of the commissionings that were kind of being done um, in the safe social distancing kind of motifs. But what a great testimony. There's another little feature that I kind of came up with this idea last year, and we let it percolate a little bit, and we're finding that we're getting a lot of positive feedback. But it's that whole idea of the influencers within the Salvation Army. Jeff, what's your take on this month's column, and overall, what's your thought about that particular feature?
The dedication of these folks who are working in the trenches with the Army in whatever capacity, administratively or in a mission oriented, is just so it's wonderful to hear their viewpoints. This issue has 10 questions with Leora Conway Marino. She is the director of business for the Army's Adult Rehabilitation Centers and Family Stores in the USA Central Territory, which is rather a pivotal position now, since the current situation with finances, has impacted the adult rehabilitation centers quite severely. But she has this quote from this influencer's column. She says, "The infiltration of politically correct culture and the fear of being bold is what she sees as a challenge for the Army. Our mission states to serve human need in his name without discrimination. If we are to serve as the hands and feet of Jesus, we must never shy away from sharing the why." So, yeah, this influential question column is really very strong, and just it invites viewpoints from many different types of individuals.
Yeah, and we've had some discussions on, how to expand that a little bit and how to do the features, because, oftentimes in the Salvation Army, we like to feature, folks that have come out of great addiction and oppression, but sometimes we have other people that have just come to us in all kinds of different ways. So this issue, obviously, you just talked about the cadet who was a Russian police officer, who came to Christ through the ministry of Salvation Army, now becoming an officer. And anybody that has been around Leora knows she's she's a firecracker. She gets things done, and I'm so excited. She's brand new into this job, but she's done a lot of different ministry things with the Salvation Army, and before that, in public relations. And she's well spoken, has a heart after people, and certainly a heart after God. So we're grateful for the moments that she's given us. Let's talk about our Bible study. We have Lieutenant Colonel Dan Jennings is conducting. I think is this the second or is this the first?
It's the first. It's the initial of 12 part Bible studies on Psalm 23. Shepherd and King is what his title for the entire series.
And he's been working on something like this for a while, and he's a brilliant brilliant man of God, and him and his wife are now settling in to the Northern Division in the Central Territory, with headquarters in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So he's kind of in the midst of all of the fire. But if anybody has been around Colonel Dan, they know that this is a man of faith and a man of love, and a man of great intellect. And I think he is on to some great things here with Psalm 23. We would encourage our readers, consider that as maybe a material that you can use for your own personal Bible study, or, in a group, use the material. Jeff, I still get told often there's a couple of core throughout the country where they're using the war cry as their adult Sunday school curriculum. Go figure.
Yeah. Well, this is a good one because he really dives deep into the substance of Psalm 23. And again, it's timely and encouraging in that it really talks about or explains how God is many things, including provider, protector, shepherd. So it's very well worth people's while to get into that study.
Now we're continuing in the center section of our of the war cry. We started this with last July's, and it's been a success, and we're continuing on with our millennial section. Uh, we had Casey Nicole talk here on maintaining relationships. And again, Elizabeth, I believe we've done a podcast with Casey.
Yeah, that'll be coming out later this July.
Yeah. So you want to pay particular attention to that, and we're grateful to the assistant to the editorial director, Michelle, who is responsible for the material and coordinating these pages.
Yeah, that's a really good study. I mean, there's an interview with Casey Nicole. She talks about toxic friendships and how important it is to surround yourself with people who, are like-minded to a degree, but also supportive.
Now, one of our favorite people in the Salvation Army world are two people that we're fortunate that work out of national headquarters. They live in North Carolina, but there are ambassadors for holiness for the Salvation Army nationally, and that's Bill and Diane URI. And I've been they kind of fall under my preview as program secretary. And one of the things that we've been working with both of them is to submit some articles, and especially during the COVID time. And Bill has written it's one article. I mean, he had so much material and it was so rich. I know that you've had to work it down a little bit and edit it, and he's been sitting with this article for
Yeah.
there's a lot of going back and forth, but he talks about what it means to be a Christian and a patriot. What were your thoughts on this?
He's one of those writers who, has a lot of depth. There's a lot of richness to what he's thinking about. But yeah, he talks about, the marks of patriotism, love of place, love of the past, that patriotism is principled, and that it takes a personal pledge. He's talking about things like how important virtue and um, God and liberty are to as foundational principles that explains America's greatness. He says if patriotism is not moral at its core, it can become a perverted kind of love. So he obviously has a deep love for his country. And I think that comes through. And I think we can all celebrate that.
So we're grateful for the ministry that the Uris have been doing across the country, and hopefully they'll be able to get back at it as the COVID restrictions kind of start to lift and the travel bans are lifted from us. But we're appreciative for the work that they're doing behind the scenes. Well, this is a very exciting issue, Jeff. I'm thrilled with the outcome of it, and thank you and the entire NHQ Publications team for putting something together that's we all should be proud of.
Well, thank you too for, guiding us through all of this and keeping us aware of what's happening.
So we want to encourage you to continue to be an ambassador of God's love in the communities in which we're at. We would also encourage to, be gracious to each other. There's been a lot of talk about people needing to listen. And then at the same time, when people are listening, there's a push for them to say more. So there's a lot of contradictory sort of things that are going on in our time right now. And now's a time, especially for us as Salvationists, to show grace to one another, to encourage one another, and as officers to be renewed once again in our covenant, why it is we're doing this work in the first place. And Jeff, I mean, I'm here today with you and Elizabeth, and I'm doing this work because of God's call in my heart that came to me in 1979, and it is still solid today. And that call has led me all the way over here to Alexandria, Virginia, to be with you guys and to be responsible to get this magazine out. And this magazine is telling people there is good news. There is good news. There's news that will calm our spirits, give us the peace that passes all, uh, everything that we can experience, and certainly can give us the ability of sharing love with other people.
We ask also people, to pray for us because we are just bringing what abilities we have to the Lord and doing the best we can, but we look for Him to provide the increase and to send this where it's needed. And that includes to prisons and that we mail to.
So we encourage you to read the War Cry. The War Cry is now available to you free of charge online at www.thewarcry.org. We want to thank you for reading the War Cry. And that's going to end this episode of the Fight for Good podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts. And if I'm correct, producer Elizabeth, this is episode number 41.
That is correct.
We have made a lot of these podcasts and we encourage you to subscribe, give us a few likes, on in the iTunes store there. What is it going to hurt you if you just click 5 stars or maybe 4 stars, whatever? Just give us a review. Show us, that we're on to something here. There's a bevy of podcasts. There's millions of podcasts out there. This one is telling the story of the War Cry magazine in the United States, and we're telling the story of Jesus Christ and the hope that comes from following Him. But also, don't forget to follow the War Cry and Peer magazine, which is our teen magazine, on Facebook, Instagram, IG, as the kids say, Twitter, and Pinterest. And soon, Elizabeth, we're going to get those peer folks to start doing stuff on TikTok. That software program that Jeff and I, it's illegal for us to use.
Right. Yeah. Even if I submit, they still send it back. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for listening. And until next time, this has been the Fight for Good podcast. Bye for now.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts. When life demands 24/7 attention, you may find it impossible to rest. We live in a fast-paced world. It doesn't slow down, so why should you? With an engaging narrative, Rest for the Rest of Us provides a refreshing and informative take about Sabbath rest. It speaks to anyone looking to renew their sense of joy and find options for coping with life's pressures. Learn more at crestbooks.com.